Welcome to Tales on the Towpath, the podcast where every mile tells a story.
We're two runners who spend a lot of time out here on the C&O Canal towpath, talking about training, racing, and everything that happens between the miles.
From early morning runs to the stories that keep us moving.
This is where endurance meets inspiration, one step, one tail at a time.
So lace up and join us on the path because every trail has a story and this one's ours.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Adam Lowe.
I'm Chris Earl.
And I'm Katie Lowe.
Hey, Adam and Katie. I know you guys probably felt it this week too, but summer is here. It went from 60s and low 70s to high 90s, almost overnight this week. And it got me thinking about kind of how the weather did the same thing last year for Lock to Lock. I don't know if you remember, but the week leading up to Lock Marathon, we had really cool temperatures and it was shaping up to be just an amazing day for the race. And then lo and behold, on Saturday morning, we woke up and it was in the low 70s and the humidity was through the roof. And it went from being what we thought were going to be perfect race conditions to setting the stage for me to have just an absolute blow up of a marathon. I had trained all summer. It was my A race for the fall that I was gonna lower my Boston qualifying time and get below that buffer. And I came in pretty good shape. And boy, that race started off great. I went back and looked it up today. I went through the first half in 1:33, which was well below where I needed to be to get below 3:10, and turned the corner and headed back out for the second loop. And the wheels just fell off. The humidity caught up with me. The dehydration caught up with me. And I went from, I think, averaging 7:10 pace to, I think I looked and saw on the back half, I averaged 10:21 per mile for the second half.
Wait, 10?
So 10. There was that much walking involved because of the cramping and all of that. So by far that has to be my worst marathon experience ever. And I attribute it almost exclusively just to the temperatures and not being ready for it. Have you guys ever had a race or a long training run experience similar?
Katie, I think you are actually muted at the moment. So you're going to have to rewind that whole story and we'll let you start over. Go ahead.
Okay, as a matter of fact, and that's exactly how I said it the first time around, so just so you know that. As a matter of fact, I was gonna talk about Lock to Lock as well. Not because I had an epic, crash and burn by any means, but because it was my A goal race for at least the half marathon. I had trained so hard, so diligently. I was ready to PR my half marathon that day. I have never been more confident about a race in my whole entire life. I just knew it was going to happen. I was going to PR and I was going to do it in a big way. And then I didn't. I missed it by one measly little minute, which at the time was probably, I think, my second fastest half marathon. But that day I had been so confident because of all the work I'd put in and because of my training. I just knew I was ready to run probably 5 minutes faster than what I did, if not more. And I just couldn't get my body to cooperate. I was ready to go and it just couldn't happen. And I don't like to make excuses, but finally, after enough people said, "Hey, the weather probably got to you," when I could reflect, when I could bring myself down from the disappointment and reflect on it, I really know that that's what happened. That was the whole reason that everything I knew was gonna happen did not happen that day. And, I was so disappointed, but now I can look back and say, "Okay, there were lessons learned, and there's needs to be more grace whenever the weather turns out like this." How about you, Adam?
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I've had, believe it or not, plenty of bad experiences in the heat. You would think I would learn from one or two of them. But one of the first ones I can remember was the historic half marathon in Fredericksburg, which is in May. And sometimes, just like right now, you get these 2 or 3 day periods where it's 80 degrees and humid. And I think on race morning, it was 70 degrees and 100% humidity where you're sweating before you even tie your shoes, right? So, but It was probably, way too young in my running career to care or know anything about the heat. So I went like full send from the gun. And by mile 7, like Katie just said, the body wasn't cooperating anymore. And I just couldn't realize why I was not running, 6-minute pace or 6:10 pace anymore. And then finally I realized, oh yeah, it's because it's 100% humidity out here and I can't breathe. And I just struggled my way to the finish line. So, that was one time where I did not take the heat into consideration for sure. So, with all three of these stories being said, I think you guys can guess the topic of our podcast today, which I don't know that we said yet. But now that we got you vested, you are here. You cannot hit stop or pause or nothing. You got to finish listening. We are going to talk about the heat and running in the heat. So, in different ways that you can adjust and still run your best during those times.
So, Adam, because I've kind of found myself to be susceptible to the heat and humidity, and I've done a lot of, my own research. I hate that term, but, that's exactly what I've done. A lot of reading, a lot of listening to other podcasts about running in the heat. And, it turns out that it's not just because it's uncomfortable, because it's hot. Our bodies actually do react to the heat in a negative way from a performance standpoint. The first and most obvious way that I think everybody is aware of is, just you sweat more when it's hot, right? That's the body trying to cool itself off. The sweat comes out and is on your skin and it's supposed to evaporate, and that has a cooling effect. But when it's humid, it doesn't evaporate at the same rate. And so you just end up producing more sweat and it runs off and you don't get that same cooling effect. So you end up dehydrating faster. And, some of the stuff that I've read says that even like a 2% drop in your overall body hydration can start to have a negative effect on your performance. But there's a second effect that happens that I don't think most people realize, and that actually I've seen a lot of people be frustrated with when they talk about their summer running. And that's that when, in addition to, your sweat trying to cool you off, your body will actually divert blood away from your muscles to your skin to get it closer to the surface so that it can cool off as well. And when it does that, you have obviously less oxygen going to your muscles. So you lose that performance benefit or requirement. And actually, your heart rate has to increase to keep your blood flowing and circulating throughout the body. So a lot of people will notice that for the same perceived effort, their pace will be significantly slower. It could be up to a minute slower than normal for what feels like the same run. But that's actually just because of that effect of, I think it's called cardiac drift, but it's really related to your body just doing everything it can to try to cool down. Because just like a really high fever, if you overheat while you're running, you start to do damage and body processes start to fail. So
Okay. Well, I am pumped about this episode then because the way Chris just explained that, I am going to learn so much in the next 45 to 50 minutes because when I go run in the summer, I honestly forget like how hard summer running is. I know like a lot of people by August, you're just like, oh, I suck at running. I'm never going to be able to run my fall marathon time. So hopefully what we go over today will give everybody some tips and tricks and stuff like that to use during those months in order to realize that, hey, it's tough for everybody, but these things can hopefully make it a little bit more comfortable as far as like performance and keeping your body healthy.
I think most of us actually forget that when we get into the summer months because we've been training through the winter or the spring and it's been reasonable temperatures. And then all of a sudden we get these humid and hot days. And just like Adam said, we think, oh my gosh, I'm not keeping the paces. Or I know last summer during my training plans, there would be just days that I could not hit my paces. I could not maybe sustain the pace that I was trying to for the number of miles I needed to on a tempo run. And it just feels like you're failing and like, I used to be able to do this. Why can't I do it now? And it's really hard for me to say, well, oh, it's because of the heat. But that's where like having people that you can talk to about it, bounce ideas off of, a coach that can remind you, well, hey, sometimes maybe the effort has to be the win for the day. Your paces might be slower, but you have to kind of adjust for some of these things. But it's really hard to do that. Don't you guys think that?
I do. Like, I get so frustrated because my legs just feel so dead, like halfway into a long run in the summertime. And it's just like we're saying, if you're not getting oxygen to those muscles, of course they feel dead. They're not able to do what they're supposed to do when they're properly oxygenated. So
So is there a way to counteract that? I mean,
that's a great
for
question.
me, I just think, "Oh, do I just need to hydrate more?" I mean, I can't make it less hot, but
Okay, so
Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Chris, I was gonna before we jump into like exactly how we do things and everything, I was gonna ask like for today, like a day like today, when I look up, it was 67 degrees and it was gonna get up near 100, right? And it's like the first, well, yesterday was hot too, same kind of thing yesterday, but these are the first two truly hot days in the afternoon, right? So for me, the smart thing to do was I ran in the morning when it was cooler, and then just to get a little bit more used to the heat, I ran 2 miles after school as well, just to get some time, in that heat. I wouldn't recommend just going out and when it's 95 degrees for the first time and trying to put in 10 miles, right? So, I know that's one of the first, like that's my first, like, trick, I guess.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to there, Adam, is like heat acclimation, and that's where you force your body to actually run in those high temperatures so that it gets used to and adapts to that. From what I've read, it takes anywhere from 10 to 14 days to truly have your body adjust to those that different temperature. But I think, your idea of getting a core workout in the morning while it's cooler, right? That's gonna I think I do the same thing. That's gonna be where you can still try to hit your performance. Now, one thing I will remind everybody is usually in the summertime, even though it's 67 degrees, the humidity might be 90 plus percent. So you're not going to get that evaporative cooling as much. So even though it's lower temperature, right? I mean, Adam, we're pretty sweaty in the morning on a towpath run. So you're still going to struggle there a little bit. It won't be as the same as a nice crisp spring run, but I think that's a great strategy for trying to get around the hottest part of the day. I did the same thing. I wasn't able to run this morning because of a work commitment. So tonight, instead of going out and doing a normal hour and 15-minute run at my normal pace, I cut it back to about 45 minutes and at a much slower pace, just so my body gets a little bit of time to adapt and I'm not putting too much stress on it because of that extra heat.
Yeah, so all right, Katie, now we're ready for your question.
okay, so then how can we combat this feeling of death in the heat? Ho are there ways that we can counteract these things other than getting acclimated to it? It's still gonna have an effect. So, do we just stay hydrated, extra hydrated, electrolytes, like, or are there other things that we can take into account as well?
So I one of the strategies I've seen folks talk a lot about, and like if you watch people who go out and run some of these 100-mile ultras in the desert, taking things like an ice bandana or an ice hat, right? Something that just helps provide additional cooling. There's clothing now that is geared toward or marketed as being, extra cooling. Some of the fabrics wick differently, I think, and so they evaporate more readily. I think everybody probably saw, or maybe they didn't, but at the Western States last year, the winner was wearing that, for lack of a better term, knit top that did not look like a traditional running singlet, right? But it was a knit mesh that allegedly was designed specifically to improve airflow and cooling. So I think there are some tricks you can do with clothing or with ice, but Katie, I think you nailed the big one is just making sure you stay on top of your hydration and For me, I prefer my fluids to be extra cold in the summertime just to help cool off internal temperature. But how about you guys?
Yeah, well, I know like when we did Cacapen 12-hour challenge, that race is in the summer, usually June. It was in July before, and it is I've done it twice and it's been 95 degrees each time. And last year I wore one of our shameless plug Tulo ice hats, and I was stuffing that with ice at both of the aid stations. I did not have an ice bandana at the time, but if I did, I would have worn it. And then let's see. Oh, the creek, right? I like we every anytime we ran past a creek, we I would dip my hat in it, dip my head in it, just try to stay cool. I even drank out
He
of it.
drank from it.
I mean, the water's moving. I got no shame. It's just like I was thirsty. I would actually what I did a lot was actually put that water in my empty handheld, and then I would squirt that water like on my back and on my chest while I was running and kind of cooled me off there. But yeah, I mean, it was just kind of like you're out there for 12 hours and you're trying to stay moving, not like a survive at all costs, but basically anything to stay cool. I think I had a bucket hat on a couple times, and you're just trying to. But yeah, the ice. I've seen people wear like arm sleeves and put ice in those. Katie, you ever put
Now
ice
you tell us.
in your sports bra or anything?
No, I've never done that, but I
Yeah,
know
me
Mariah
neither.
has.
Oh, okay.
So, Cacapen's a bit of an extreme example just because it is a 12-hour challenge, but it was all of 95, 96, 97 degrees, something like that last year. It was so hot. When I ran that race, I know that when we came around, our buddies Alicia and Donald were there, and Alicia had this. It was probably just their cooler that they had, like, other, like, drinks and things put in, but they weren't, like, eating the ice or anything, so she would take the towel that I had, like, a cooling towel, sort of one of those long ones that are it's kinda made for that. She dumped it, and then she also, like, filled it with ice for me, so I, like, twisted it so the ice would stay in, and then most of the next loop, I would, like, hold it on my wrists, hold it on my neck, and just because those are supposedly places where will cool you down faster, right? Those are places where you can get to the blood flow or something. Again, I'm no doctor,
Yep.
don't take
Yep.
anything I say as medical advice.
You're exactly right, right? If you look at your wrists, right, you
Mhm.
can see the veins, right, in your neck, right? You've got those major arteries that are going up through there, and they're very close to the skin. That's why you check your pulse there.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to cool off that blood supply, that's going to cool off your internal body temperature. So that was really smart
And then
to do.
so I also didn't have a nice bandana at that point, but I have since bought one, so I'd be ready now. However, that whole creek thing, I could not get behind. I had no idea Adam was doing such things. I'd be running and I'd be around somebody else and they would dip their hat or some clothing article in this creek. And all I could think of was, ooh, there's probably so many like organisms and bugs and stuff in that. And when we got finished, Adam told me he drank out of the thing. I could not believe it. I mean, I just had to throw that in there. I know that doesn't have much to do with the heat, but however, I think some of my hardest runs are just training runs because you go out and you might have a handheld or something with you, but you don't have the ice that's sitting there that might be there on race day, and you're not planned maybe for how fast your body temperature can rise.
Yeah, that's a great point, Katie. One of the tricks I use is in the summertime, especially on really hot days, instead of doing a long out and back for my long run, I'll do a short loop so that I'm constantly coming back by a single point where I can stash a cooler and refresh my drinks and make sure it's, ice cold and all that good stuff. So
Definitely.
I've always found that too, like a race like Cacapen, when it starts at 8 in the morning and it's not like obviously 95 degrees yet, your body has time to kind of warm up with the day. So like the high of the day might not feel as hot as it does like when you walk out of work at 4 p.m. and it's 95 degrees and you've been hanging out in the AC all day, right? And then you got to go run. So I think that helps a lot too with like the mental aspect of it. And I think we'll talk about that later. But like for sure, like allowing your body. So I guess it kind of makes sense if you're going to go for a 5 mile run, start a little slower, let your body warm up to it, which it will, right? And then kind of try to ease into a pace rather than gung ho from the start.
Yeah, I completely agree because I remember at Cacapen, I was never really miserable because of the heat, but it probably was that kind of ease into it at the beginning of the day. It wasn't quite as bad, and that's when you're running a little faster because it's just at the start, and you can kind of adjust as you go. And I think maybe that's an important part of it is that adjustment piece, because if you keep trying to push through, that's where you might get in trouble. But if you kind of adjust your expectations and adjust your pace to maybe more effort based. You're still gonna get a good workout in, a good training run, but not necessarily put yourself in danger of something like overworking your body in the heat.
Yeah, I think another thing to be mindful of too is the sun, right? Like a lot of times if we run early in the day or late in the day, the sun's not as high in the sky, so it's not as bad. But if you're on a long run or doing an ultra like Cacapen where you're going to be running during the middle of the day, I think being able to run in the shade, right? Obviously everybody knows that feels a little bit better, but if you have to run in full sun, one of the things I do, and sometimes I get some questionable looks, is I'll actually wear a long sleeve running shirt and just make sure I keep it wet, whether that's through putting ice in the sleeves or just actually, wetting it down with a water bottle or whatever, so that you get that evaporative cooling, but you're not taking the direct brunt of the sun's rays. So you get the sun protection and hopefully less skin cancer, but also a little bit of extra cooling effect from the having more surface area that stays wet and can evaporate and cool longer.
Now, Chris, are you wearing like tight shirts like that or are they loose?
The one I have is loose. It gives me plenty of space to put ice in and also to move with the breeze if there is some breeze. It also has a hood, which I never run with the hood up, but I will fill that hood with ice and let it just slowly drip down my back on a hot run like we had with the final countdown last year.
Yeah, good. And while we're talking about shirt selection, should we go with dark colors or light colors?
I think definitely light colors, right? You don't want to be out there acting like a giant solar panel
So
if that sun's beating down with a dark colors. So
All right. Hey, we were talking about drinking out of the creek. Let's go back to that for a second. Let's talk about intake of fluids. So, how do I know if I should get like an electrolyte drink, some tailwind, or if I should just drink plain water? What do you think, Chris?
yeah, so there's a lot of science behind all of that question, and I spent a lot of time last summer reading about this. And I think the easiest and probably most important thing that any runner can do that's going to be running in the summertime is actually calculate their sweat rate. Um, Most of the time, if it's hot in similar conditions, you're going to lose the same amount of sweat per hour of running consistently from run to run. It's not affected, at least for me, it's not affected much by pace or anything. It's really a function of just how long you're out there and in those conditions. And it's really not that hard to calculate. It's just some really simple math. If you weigh yourself before you run and weigh yourself after, the difference is water loss, and that's primarily through sweating. And so the only thing you gotta be careful with there is you don't want to do it fully clothed, because if your clothes are retaining the sweat, you're not gonna get the full loss of water that your body has experienced. So do it in the privacy of your home, maybe not down on the canal.
He said that just for me, just so everybody knows.
oh, we all know.
But it's amazing how many pounds of fluid you can lose in a very short amount of time, and it's more than you would ever think to carry with you. And so it has made me be more mindful of how often or how much I need to actually carry with me on a hot long run. So, like on a Sunday run day, if I'm going to go 15 miles or more, I'm going to have 3 or 4 500 ml flasks available to me. And I'll start off carrying it. And I found that if I go through one of those in about 4 or 5 hours, it allows me to pretty much keep up based on my sweat loss. But obviously everyone's is going to be a little bit different. So it's really important, I think, to track that.
So this may be a silly question. However, people talk about being heavy sweaters or light sweaters, and that seems to go right along with what you're saying about weighing yourself and seeing how much fluid you lose. But sometimes certain people that I know that, especially one that might be on this podcast, are like covered in salt. Like their clothes are white, their hat is white after a race, and then other people may not have that. So could there be a difference in the amount of sodium or whatever that is, salt, sodium, whatever, Na chloride, I don't know. Is there could there be a difference in that that's coming out too? And then where do electrolytes play into this as well?
Yeah, so you nailed it, Katie. So that what you just described are the two factors, right? There's the total sweat loss, and so if you know that, right, that's step one, and then step two is in your salt or in your sweat, you're going to lose salt. That's the electrolytes that are in your drinks. It's primarily sodium, and everyone is different on that. One thing that's really neat in the science is whether you're sweating just a little bit or you're sweating a lot for you as an individual based on the temperature of that run, the concentration of sodium in your sweat is pretty much consistent, whether it's 35 degrees and you're sweating or 100 degrees when you're sweating. Now, the difficult part is there's no good way to really test that at home, but there are companies that you, for a small fee, can go in and they will actually test your sweat and tell you how much sodium you're losing per milliliter or per ounce of sweat that you lose. And then, they will adapt your electrolyte mix and make you a custom drink mix that will give you the right amount of sodium per milliliter as you're trying to rehydrate to keep your body in equilibrium. If anybody's interested in that, the one that I found that seems to have sort of the best results, and we're not sponsored by them, but they could sponsor us if they want to, is Precision Hydration. I have attempted 2 or 3 times to try to schedule an appointment with them to actually have my sweat tested and see what it is, but because of my own scheduling conflicts, I haven't been able to pull it off. There's not, for us here in the West Virginia, Maryland area, you're going to have to travel a few hours to be able to get to one of their locations to do the test. And so I'm trying to time it with other travel so that it is cost effective and time effective and all that. But I will eventually do it. And hopefully maybe this summer, if I do, I'll be sure to share the results here on the podcast.
Are there aren't at-home type things like that? I swear that our friend Farah was doing a sweat test at one point in time. This was years ago, so now I may be remembering, but there was like a patch she put on her arm, and she was supposed to wear it during an easy run or a tempo run or maybe a race just at different times, but I don't remember all the details. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, there certainly are patches and things like that that you can wear, kind of like a heart rate monitor, but a skin sweat monitor. The problem from what I've seen is that they're very inconsistent in the data that they give you. And so I haven't found one yet that I've been willing to, put the money out for and give it a try just because of the inconsistency in the
Right,
data. So
right.
the in-lab test is sort of the gold standard, and you really only ever have to do it once because it allegedly does not change unless you do some like very specific adaptation training to try to force it to change, I guess. So for the most part, for an average runner like me, I could go get that and dial in my tailwind and whether I need to supplement it, one way or the other to get myself to where I should be fine throughout a race. But when what I do, and I don't know about you guys, but if I'm sticking with my hydration plan where I'm using a fixed amount of tailwind, if I start to get behind on my electrolytes, I'll start to get those initial twinges of cramps starting to come on, and so that's just when I supplement with a salt tab or a little pickle juice,
Yeah.
but emphasis on a little pickle
Right.
juice.
Well, we learned from Taylor that you can definitely overdo pickle juice. On a previous podcast, I don't remember what number. Adam, you want to take a guess? I'll fact
19.
check you later. I'm gonna go a little later, maybe like 22. But anyway, I know, Adam, you've had some occurrences of potentially overdoing electrolytes. Do you wanna talk
Yeah,
about that a little bit?
yeah, I was gonna mention that it's almost kind of hard to believe because, as Katie said, I am like a heavy sweater and definitely a heavy salt sweater, especially during the marathon. I think like when I'm giving that like hard effort, and when like I know when I was done in Boston, I had like a white sweat ring on my hat and everything, and but during my last two ultras, well, okay, not JFK, it didn't happen then. So my last longer efforts than that, Cacapen and Capital Backyard, during both of those races, my hands started to swell, and I actually had to I actually like almost took my watch off during Cacapen because it was like cutting circulation off in my wrist, and I had to like loosen it up real bad. And at Cacapen, I had no idea what was going on. But I was drinking Tailwind every time we got back to the start finish line and at every aid station. And I was only drinking Tailwind. And so, we kind of problem solved after the race and realized that I was taking in too much sodium, which in turn helped me out a lot at Capital because at Capital, I was doing Tailwind and G1M Sport, which is also a lot of sodium. And after like 30 miles, my hands started swelling up again. And like we didn't panic because, we kind of knew what was going on. So I asked Katie, I'll let her jump in. Go ahead.
Was just gonna say you were also eating salty, like, hash browns and snacks, and it goes beyond just the liquids you were taking in, it was also the foods, and it just I think we forget about that because on my way home, I had to leave if I don't know if all our listeners have heard that episode, but I had to leave because I had my own race on Adam's 2nd day of the backyard, and I as I was leaving, I text our friend Kara, who's a dietitian, and she sent me actually a calculator to be able to you can put in if you're a light sweater, a moderate sweater, a heavy sweater, and then how many I guess the distance you're running or something. I don't remember all this exactly, but it'll give you a calculation of how much sodium you should be taking in. And then you can look up the things that you're taking. And when I kind of did a rough estimate of all the liquids and salty foods Adam was taking in, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you're overdoing it. Cut back on that, move to water a little bit, and, like, kind of dilute some of that sodium you've been taking in," and apparently, Adam, you can take back over, but like, rectified, right?
Yeah, it went like the swelling went back down, and like eventually, I think after maybe like 3 to 4 hours, the swelling went back down, and I could like see the veins in the back of my hand again, and I wasn't as nervous. I mean, the good news is, and here's another way to tell about like if you're hydrated and stuff like that, but like we were peeing every single lap, and when I was doing that, it was pretty clear, which is we want a little bit of yellow in there, but it definitely I was watching the color of it, so I was happy with that, and that's when I knew I wasn't like underhydrated. I was good in that regard. I just obviously was having too much salt.
Yeah, and just along those lines, one thing we should mention is that just because you do have to use the bathroom a lot and are hydrated, you do have to be careful to make sure that you are actually getting the right amount of electrolytes in the fluids. There have been a lot of cases of where people were only hydrating with water, and you actually get to the opposite effect of what you were describing, Adam, where you were going from the swelled hands and you were drinking water to bring it back down. These folks, their electrolytes get so low that it actually starts to affect the heart's ability to actually beat. And you can get in a lot of trouble with that. It's called hyponatremia, where you're overhydrated with just plain water. Where I first heard about this was, probably 20 years ago when a lot of people were just getting into marathoning and they would walk the marathons using the Galloway method, right? But they were constantly drinking water the whole time. And because they were putting forth less physical exertion compared to someone who is running, they weren't sweating as much, they weren't losing the sodium. And so the constant water, these folks were actually dropping on the course because they were diluting themselves out so much. So it is something to be mindful of, but as long as you're occasionally taking an electrolyte drink, I would guess you're probably fine.
I think that in the past, there's been times where my body has almost told me that I've had too many electrolytes. Like, I can think back to Miners Lady one year. It was so hot that day too, and that's an 8-hour challenge. And I think I had an element in my water on the way to the race. And then I had my vest, my bottle had element in it as well. And by the time I got, like, around on my first loop, it was very hot, I was very sweaty, maybe it was my second loop, but my body was, like, screaming for just water, and I didn't have any, and I was, like, panicked because I had that mixture in my bottle, but I just couldn't bring myself to drink any more of it, and I think that was just my body's sign. Now, it won't always tell me, so I know I gotta be better planned, and I've learned a lot since that race because I think that was my first kind of dipping my toes in the long distance running thing that you guys all do. But it was just crazy to me that I just could not bring myself to ingest any more electrolytes because I was overdoing it, and then just water was was very good for the like, most of the time. I mean, I took in other forms like gels and things, but
It's funny you mentioned that, Katie, because I've seen stories where people will talk about how during a race, if they are using like Tailwind for their electrolyte source, when their body is starting to get too high on electrolytes, all of a sudden their Tailwind will start to taste salty.
oh,
And so that's kind of like a mental
yeah.
cue to them, or that their body's telling them, no, you've got enough salt. You don't need this now. But when it's low, they drink it and they don't even notice the taste of the salt. So I don't know if any of that's true. Like, but I've seen stories of people reporting similar things.
Well,
So
just in general, I've heard about, like, when your body's craving things like salty foods or sweet foods or, like, different types of things. I'm no expert, but that means that your body is in need of that. So, I mean, I don't think that's what it's telling me when I'm craving, like, a piece of chocolate cake at the end of a day, but maybe, if you really get in tune with your body's needs and know what you're, looking for, it will send you signals.
All right, let me ask you guys a question. So let's say it's the middle of June. I'm waking up on a Sunday morning, gonna go do my 10 miles on the towpath. It's already 70 degrees. It's hot, it's humid. I get my cup of coffee, right? What else, if anything, do I need to drink before I go run? Do I have to drink? Should I just have water? Should I mix some element in there? Like, just if I, what I'm asking is, can I get away with just water, or should I mix in some sodium, or did what I drank the night before, is that good enough to get me through? And then I can just rehydrate the hell out of it after I'm done running, you know? I guess, what do you do, Chris?
So it really depends on what I've done the day before. So before a Sunday run day, Saturday night, I'm going to try to make sure I'm hydrating so that when I wake up in the morning, I'm not in any kind of deficit. Starting a run like a 10-mile run on a hot Sunday morning, it can just escalate very quickly, right? Like once you start to get into that cycle, it's very hard to catch up. So I do my best to try to not be dehydrated before the run. That's one of the reasons why in the summertime I like to break my runs up for the day and do doubles, because it's a lot easier to catch back up after a run of 4 miles than it is a run of 10 miles. And it gives me all day to get ready for that second run. So I think the answer is it depends, and it really depends on what you did the day before. If you're waking up dehydrated and all you're going to have is that coffee, I would probably bring some Tailwind with you to sip in the car on the way there, and put it in a handheld to carry with you, because you're probably going to want it by mile 3 or 4.
So Adam is known to not bring enough fluids with him to runs. He's also known to steal his wife's water because he didn't bring his own to runs. So my suggestion to Adam would be definitely drink some fluids other than coffee before the run, but take some with you so you can do the Chris thing where you come back. Like the towpath is wonderful because you can go one direction for a couple miles, come back the couple miles, stop at the car, rehydrate. God forbid you carry something with you, Adam, but then you can go the other direction, come back to the car, refuel, rehydrate, whatever you need to do. But just take something with you so you
Well,
have it.
if the pumps on the towpath are on,
Oh
there's
my God.
water pumps. Free ironclad water every 2 miles. It's
You mean
amazing.
those pumps that say, "Do not for human consumption," or something like
Yeah,
that?
but
Do not drink?
that sign is on the other side of the pump. You're not supposed to be reading it.
Oh.
You just pump from the other side. But
So
anyway,
if you're running on the canal, you're allowed to drink from it, but if you're just like a normal person camper, they let you know in that situation not to drink
yeah,
from it.
no, you
Yeah,
should
yeah,
not
okay,
drink it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, but Chris, to your point, I think for me in the summer, if I get behind, like I'm in trouble, right? So like I just try to stay on top of it and you know, like if I realize, oh man, I haven't gone to the bathroom in like 5 hours, it's probably not a good thing. I'm probably behind. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing in the summer is just to not get behind.
And I think the important thing, and this is the one that's probably the hardest to do, is when you get out there on a run and you realize you're behind and that it's not going well, that's the time to take a knee, let that long run go, come back another day when you're ready. You can do a lot of damage to yourself and potentially put yourself at risk of heat stroke if you continue to push through when you're severely dehydrated.
And just to throw this in there, when I was talking about hydration with my physical therapist, he told me, Adam, that I could count any liquids that I drank other than my coffee or any alcoholic beverages. So whatever you're
This
drinking
was
right now,
John, this was
you
not
can't
John.
count as
God did not say that.
yes, it was John. John did say that.
Why do we have this podcast? So you two could rag on me? I don't understand. What's going on here?
Well,
That's really interesting though, Katie, because I have heard other nutritionists say that coffee is okay. It's not
oh,
the
really?
best, but it's better than nothing,
So,
right? Like
yeah,
water is water. You're going to get some diuretic effect, but that's really only I think it diuretic means you have to go to the bathroom
yeah,
more, right?
right.
So that's where you're losing the water.
And I think that
But
was the point
it,
was that, like, if those other options, the alcohol and or I'm sorry, the alcohol and the coffee would, like, dehydrate you a little bit, so it kinda counteracted the liquid that was going in with it, but, yeah, I'm sure there's different schools of thought on lots
What
of the
about
stuff we're
yeah.
talking about.
what about the beer, Chris? Any dietitians say that the beer is good for you for running
It's probably not your best choice to hydrate with before the run, but I've definitely rehydrated with a beer after a
after?
run.
Yeah.
Or during the run.
Well, yeah, I mean, a 12-hour ultra, there's going to be a Michelob Ultra in there somewhere, right? So,
I mean, it's in the name.
That's mostly water.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, Chris, you touched on the next thing that I wanted to talk about, and that was like, I guess, embracing the adjusting part, right? So you wake up and it's 70 plus degrees already, right? The sun's already out, or you wait till the afternoon and it's 90 plus. And I know that my 7:30 pace is now going to be way too hard for the day, right? So we're going to go, what should I do? Should I just go, nope, I'm going at it anyway. I'm gonna try to do it right. The smart thing to do is to do an 8:30 pace or a 9 minute pace, right? In order to still get the run in. But like here's the question. How do I adjust my pace and still allow the run to be shown on Strava? Right. That's what everybody cares about, right?
So the really funny thing is when you started that question and you said, when it's really hot out, do I just say, and I thought you were going to say, nope, I'm not running today. And I was like, that's never going to be the answer for me. But yeah, no, I think right there's running for heart rate and then there's running for perceived effort. And I think we just have to be realistic and accept that it is harder to run when it's hot. And so you can either, run so that it feels like it would have felt at the pace you were going to run. So, and know that you're getting some, cardiovascular benefit from that, or just go ahead and, dial that pace back and, let your heart rate actually be where you want it to be. And, not worry about what people on Strava think. Cause I don't know. I don't look at like I look at it out of curiosity, never out of judgment when I'm looking at someone's pace or heart rate data, right? It's just curiosity. So I think people get too wrapped up in worrying about what other people think about their Strava data. And so if anybody wants to make fun of Strava data, they can look at mine because it's all over the place.
Yeah, no, I think, a lot of people we could have a whole podcast on Strava, right? Maybe that could be coming up soon, right? But a lot of people I know I just go through and read the title and then I give it a like, right? I never unless I'm coaching them or I'm really, vested in what they just ran or something like that. But anyway, that's like I said, that's another podcast. What were you gonna say, Katie? Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna ask a follow-up question. Are we ready for that?
We're ready.
I mean, what about if it's a race? Should I have let's circle back to my a half marathon. When it was not turning out to be the beautiful, perfect race day weather that we had for 2 weeks leading up to it, should I have adjusted my pace and still expected to be able to PR that half marathon? Or at that point, do you just say, it's probably not gonna happen today, and do you just accept it? Because I'm not very accepting of that kind of thing. My idea is, I'm gonna still go for it and see what happens, right? But Adam and I did actually have the conversation afterwards is, should I have adjusted at the beginning and maybe been able to hold on a little bit better at the end? Maybe it wouldn't have been as big of a PR that I feel like I was prepared for, but maybe I still PR on the day. What are your thoughts?
Chris, can I give the non-scientific answer first, and then I'll let you go?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so here's my answer to that. This year, I did a lot more running on the treadmill in January and February. Part of that was because of the weather outside; it was icy. The other part was because of Boston, and I've seen people do much better at Boston on a hot day that ran on the treadmill more than who went outside when it was 30 degrees. So I was trying to prepare for both. And then, of course, we had a beautiful weather day in Boston, so it didn't matter, right? But if it had been 90 degrees like it was today, no matter what training I had done, probably wouldn't have mattered, right? So if I went out at a 6:40 pace, I probably would have been done at mile 10. So the smart thing to do then would probably be to adjust it by what, 10, 15 seconds a mile, and then still kind of go, or maybe even more, I'm not sure. But your half marathon, you had trained in that weather, like through the summer
Right.
and stuff like that. So I have no like problems or anything about like both of you guys going for it, right? Like Woody went for it and ran a 2:42. So, the heat just affects people differently on different days. And, um, you know, yeah, I mean, so I would say because you had trained in it, it was perfectly fine to run your race in that weather. And again, that's the non-scientific answer.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a scientific answer, but I think some of it is like a risk reward kind
Yeah.
of calculation,
Yeah.
right? Are you willing to go for it knowing that you might blow up and run a time that's 30 minutes slower than what you were expecting? And that was kind of my calculation. I went for it. I thought, and actually when I towed the line that day, I didn't think the heat was going to bother me. I thought I was going to be fine. And
I felt the exact same way.
mile 15, 16, when the wheels started to crack, I'm like, yep, they're coming off. And there just wasn't enough, water on the course or that I could carry with me that was going to make a difference because I had gotten behind. So then I just, I climbed on the struggle bus and I leapfrogged with our buddy Jeff all the
Mhm.
way back to the finish line, and we celebrated one of the worst marathons we've ever run. But if you're not willing to, like, if that risk calculation isn't there for you and you want to still be somewhat comfortable but okay with a slightly slower time, then yeah, do like what Adam was saying, dial that pace back. And that's something I did in my one and only Boston experience back in 2012 when it was 80 degrees before I even started that morning. I was like, there's no way I'm going to run sub 3, so I'm going to enjoy the day. And I went out and dialed the pace back and had a somewhat fun, 30 minutes slower than I was expecting marathon, but I got to do the experience that day. So it just all comes down, I think, to that risk reward.
Yeah, I think what you described is pretty much exactly how I've raced and how I've gone about racing mentally before any race I've done in the past, I'd say year, because there are times that I'm like, "Well, I'm just gonna go for it, and if the wheels fall off, they fall off, let them. But I'll never know what I could do if I didn't at least try, and Adam, you're exactly right, I did train in that weather. It was that beautiful 60, 70-degree 2 weeks right before Lock to Lock that had us all, like, deacclimating? Is that the correct term for that? Like, we were acclimating in the other direction, and running really comfortable, and then it just popped back up. And I remember thinking that day, it wasn't even that hot when everybody said, "Oh, it's okay. It was really hot out today." I'm like, it wasn't that bad. I didn't think it was. But the heat, the extra heat with the humidity, like it all goes together. But you know what? If I had it to go back and do again, I would have done the same exact thing because of what you said. It's the whole premise of why we named our training group FAFO, because you go out there and you mess around or you're not gonna find out what you can do, right? So, sometimes if you wanna do something big, you gotta go for it in a smart way because let's be clear, on Lock to Lock, we were all being responsible with our intake and all that. So, we're not talking about a 98-degree day without hydrating, right? So, we were being healthy at it, but, I still would have gone out and tried for it because I knew I was ready.
So, Chris, you mentioned when I started the last question about it's already hot and, are you going to decide you're not going to run, right? And I think all of us are on a run streak currently. So, like, not running is not a question, right? We're going to go run, so we do different things, run in the shade, run early, shorten our run, tighten up the paces a little bit. But what are some mental tricks that we can use to get out there? I've often heard that, like, when it's cold outside, 30 degrees, you can put more layers on, you can talk yourself into it. Yeah, I'm not really that cold. I'm fine. I'm fine. But once you're hot, right? And your body's reacting to that heat. So, what are some mental things we can do or that you do to like counteract that?
Yeah, before I answer that though, I do want to not throw shade on our listeners who are not run streakers. And one thing I would just add on to that is, if you are watching the weather forecast and you have a rest day coming up and tomorrow is going to be 97 degrees, but your rest day is 2 days after, maybe adjust your schedule and take that 97-degree day off and run in the 80 and 85-degree weather where you can actually get the performance benefit. So no shade on anyone who doesn't run streak. I was just talking about Adam, Katie, and myself who, taking the day off just because it's hot probably
So,
isn't going to happen.
so two things. So, no shade. That was a good pun because we're talking about heat, right? But the other thing is I thought you were gonna say that you were not trying to throw shade on Lock to Lock because you guys keep
That's
talking
what
about
I
how
thought.
humid and hot it is outside every year, and I'm trying to sell out a race for the third year in a row, Chris. We got to pump this other thing up here.
Oh, I'll be back for lock to lock for sure. I'm not letting that thing beat me.
That's right.
Not yet
All
anyway.
right. So,
Um,
back to the
okay.
mental aspect. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. To your last point, though, what I was going to say though is also if you look at the weather and it's going to be 95 and you have a hard workout, if you can adjust your workout so you could do the workout on a cooler day, then you could do the easy run on the hotter day. That was a great point there, Chris. That wasn't just for run streakers, but people who are following workout plans for a fall marathon like I currently am. But go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Adam. But as far as mental tricks go, I think, the hardest part is, right? just convincing yourself that it's not going to be that bad. If you do those things like properly hydrate, think about cooling strategies, adjust the time of day that you're running, like we all can and adjust your pace. We all can still get out there and run. We don't have to take the whole summer off. Not that anybody's going to do that, but like don't let your training, or the mental side of you, disrupt your training that much. It's hot for everybody. Like if it's a race day and it's going to be 85 degrees, right? It's 85 degrees for everybody. So everybody's going to be dealing with it. A phrase I use a lot is embrace the suck, sometimes you just got to embrace the suck, and you'll be surprised at what your body can handle, when you don't let your mind defeat you. How about you guys? What do you do?
I was gonna say that people are different, right? Like we have good friends who are great heat runners. Fogel is a great heat runner. Samir has talked about it before, running in the heat and stuff. And I am horrible. Like I would much rather it I'm horrible. That's probably being a little mean, but I would much rather it be cold, 35 and 40 for a marathon than even 55 to 60. So anything above that and I would be dying. But yeah, I a lot of times in the summer, all the stuff we do to prepare, I'll usually go out and run, and like when I'm on the towpath or if I'm in the neighborhood, I get enjoyment out of the fact that like I don't see anybody else out there, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm the only one running right now. And I know that's not the truth. Obviously, there's hundreds of thousands of other people running at the same time in the world, but like, just if you don't see that many, it kind of makes you feel a little tougher, right? And as long as you're doing it smartly, it's okay. But yeah, I think that's like my biggest mental trick, right? Because you're going to go out and run anyway, and it's not going to be comfortable, but like it's going to be over in an hour or less, right? And then you get to go back in the AC.
I personally love the heat. Today, I told Adam this earlier. Today, when I walked out of school and it was like 97 degrees outside and the sun was shining right where I walked out of the door, I just stopped and put my arms out and was like, oh, I loved it. I loved the heat. Now, do I love running in the heat? Not really. But my two fastest 5Ks, maybe my number one and number three at this point, fastest 5Ks are from July 4th, where it was hot, and then from August, where it was hot. So, which the August 5K is my 5K PR ever. So, I don't think those shorter things affect me that much. I think I kind of enjoy the heat. I'm opposite of Adam. I'd rather just go out and train in heat than in the bitter cold. I hate the feeling of being cold. So, I do enjoy the heat. I think what I need to do a better job of is adjusting my expectations from the training runs in the heat. I think my goal pace or my tempo runs that I do that are harder to start with, but when I do them in the heat, they're always just exponentially harder. And I think I need to understand that if I'm supposed to hit a 7 flat pace or a 7:30, depending on which pace I'm working off of, it maybe a 7:45 is the same effort or is getting the same training benefits as the pace I was supposed to hit just because of my body battling the heat as well. So, I think that's the mental part that I need to get a handle on is that it is harder to do all that training when it's hotter. So, now I need to put a little asterisk on this. You guys are pulling me over to the dark side. I would rather race in the colder weather now because I've just realized that it actually is better for like half marathons, those kinds of things. I never thought I'd be like this, but here we are. However, I don't mind training in the heat. I just have to adjust my expectations on the other side, I think.
Right. Well, hey guys, I think we should leave our listeners with a golden rule for running in the heat. Okay, so I'm gonna share mine first. I'm gonna talk real slowly. So, Katie, you have a minute to figure one out here. All right. But I think my golden rule for running your next hot run is probably to run it on the towpath in the shade, right? Nice shady area to go running. just slow down a little bit, enjoy the scenery, and we'll see you on the towpath. How about you, Chris?
Well, that's why lock to lock isn't really all that bad if it's gonna be a hot race, right? Because it
That's
is
right.
shaded and all that.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, my golden rule is just be okay with running a little bit slower. You're still going to get that cardiovascular benefit, and it's way better than not running and taking the day off. So slow down, enjoy the day, and then get rehydrated when you're done.
That must have been Katie's.
You can use the same one, Katie. It's fine.
My golden rule would be to stay ahead on your hydration and electrolytes, make sure your pea's the right color, and buy a too low ice hat.
Chris,
Hey,
before
guys.
we go, I need you to put a hydration P chart in the show notes,
Yeah.
okay?
I was going to put the hat link,
Oh,
Yeah.
and you want a P chart. Okay,
I'll put a P chart in the pictures on the social media post. How about that?
there we go.
Hey, I do wanna let you guys know that I did fact check. Tay Rock's episode was number 19.
19.
Adam, you
Yeah,
must have cheated. There's
I've been
no way.
studying. I've been studying. I'm just
He
kidding.
knew there was a quiz coming.
Oh man. Well, hey guys, thanks for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. Hopefully you got some tips and tricks for running your next run in the heat, or at least we made you laugh a little bit. And hopefully you learned from all of our mistakes. And I don't know about these two other people, but I will continue making my heat summer mistakes. And I will try try to do better though.
Same here.
I just want to say thank you to all our listeners. This is episode 30 for us. So thank you for hanging with us. I hope you enjoyed this one. And we're looking forward to more great content as we finish out the year.
That's all for today's episode of Tales on the Towpath. Thanks for joining us on another run down memory lane and along the C&O. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to follow, share it with a friend, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep your pace steady and your stories flowing.